But the winner from Alabama is Mac Jones.
This quarterback class is a really good class. I'm just blessed to be a part of it. Obviously you can watch the guys' tape and see that we all have, great tape. And, what separates me is my preparation and my ability to take what I learned from the coaches' meetings and my own meetings and then apply it to the field. I'm going to do exactly what the coach tells me to do.
Touchdown, Alabama. Break.
Mac Jones shirtless is less defined than the other NFL quarterback prospects that will put on a NFL team's hat when Roger Goodell calls their name in just under a month in the 2021 NFL Draft. In fact, Mac Jones shirtless looks eerily similar to a young Tom Brady in his NFL Draft Combine pictures. However, is that really a bad thing? Because things seem to have turned out all right for Tom Brady. As a matter of fact, a huge theme in Mac Jones's pre-draft profile is a sheer limitless list of comparisons to the greatest football player of all time. However, the difference is Mac Jones comes from the University of Alabama and was recruited and put out there on an extremely competitive SEC field by the great Nick Saban. Alabama is a team that almost always comes as number one year after year. And although the statistics and wins are there for Mac Jones, there are also a few mistakes. There are questions asking about how much did Mac Jones really do on his own in his 1 year as the University of Alabama's starting quarterback. Let's not forget that Mac Jones was literally surrounded by superstars such as Devontae Smith, the Heisman Trophy winner, and Jalen Waddle, a player that is considered to be a lock to go in the top 20 of the NFL draft. Now, this isn't to say that Mac Jones is a scrub by any means. He is still one of the top 3 or top 4 available quarterbacks in the upcoming NFL draft class. And each one of those NFL draft prospects do have their flaws as well. Trevor Lawrence is considered to be the golden boy of this entire class. And although there has been times that he's looked human and he's looked inaccurate during his time at Clemson, for the most part, his tape is nearly flawless and you kind of have to nitpick to find some flaws in him. Zach Wilson has a remarkable cannon of an arm as he showed at his pro day. Like Patrick Mahomes, he is a remarkable improviser and is a player that can make almost every throw at the pro football level and then some. However, he never had to go up against very difficult competition, so evaluating his tape is a little difficult. Whereas Justin Fields is an extremely accurate and athletic quarterback, but there are some questions about his processing speed and the ability to pick apart defenses. Then we get to Trey Lance, who is probably the most interesting physical athlete in this entire NFL draft, but he is riddled with accuracy issues and will need some developing if he wants to fulfill his potential. Which brings us to Mac Jones, who passed for 4,500 yards in the 2020 collegiate season with 41 touchdowns and only had 4 interceptions. Thus, the way he protected the ball should give him a bump on many teams' checklists. The question we all have is what makes Mac Jones so talented and how high will he go in the so close we can barely wait for NFL draft? What NFL team wants Mac Jones and think that he can be their next guy? Does Mac Jones have any advantage to all the great quarterbacks in this year's class? Let's find out. But to really find out about Mac Jones, we gotta learn about his character. So Mac Jones grew up in Jacksonville, Florida. His dad was a collegiate athlete as well, playing tennis at Florida State University and even went on to play professionally. His siblings were college athletes as well. Mac began playing football at a very young age, starting in Pop Warner and then as quarterback for the Bowl School in Jacksonville, Florida, which is a top private school program in the state of sunshine and football. There he would help lead the school to a Florida 4A championship in 2016. At the Bowl School, Jones was mentored by longtime NFL coach Joe Dickinson, and he excelled studying college prep classes and football schemes. Jones is pretty tall at 6'3", and had 24 offers from top Division I collegiate football programs as he earned a 4-star ranking from Rivals, ESPN, and 24/7 Composite. and participated in the Rivals 100 5-Star Challenge, the Elite 11 Quarterback Challenge, and even played on the 19 under national football team. One of the biggest characteristics that stands out with Mac Jones is his academic honors, including positions on the President's List and Dean's List, all SEC academic lists, and many other honor societies during his 3 years at Alabama. He also volunteered with many organizations and camps, all while watching film, preparing for exams, and spending time on the practice field. However, he would have a little bit of a slip up before he was given the keys to the Bugatti that was the Alabama Crimson Tide offense. In the fall of 2017, at 19 years old, Mac Jones was charged with driving under the influence and with having improper identification by a minor. Since that blemish, an incident that could have turned out a lot worse, Jones has stayed off of the police radar and out of the public's negative eye and seems to be a very mature 22-year-old. Once Mac Jones arrived on campus at the University of Alabama in 2017, he would redshirt his freshman year, and the first chance for him to really show his stuff was in the 2018 A-Day spring game, where he would throw for 289 yards and 2 touchdowns and earn the honors of Most Valuable Player. In 2018, Mac Jones appeared in most of the games for Alabama, but not at the quarterback position. Most of his time was spent on the field as a holder on special teams, as Tua Tagovailoa would serve as the team's quarterback number 1. When the Crimson Tide had the game under control, really most of their games are always under control, such as a win against Louisiana Lafayette, Jones was given the ball as quarterback and even etched his name into the Crimson Tide's record books with a 94-yard bomb to Jalen Waddle. In 2019, when Tua went down with an ugly and very serious hip injury, Jones made 4 starts midway through the season. His 14 touchdown passes and over 1,599 yards were amassed mostly during those 4 starts, although he appeared in 11 total games. In the Citrus Bowl, the number 13 Crimson Tide, their worst ranking in some time, were victorious over Michigan. Mac Jones threw a bomb to Jerry Jeudy on the first play of the game for an 85-yard touchdown. The rest of the game was full of highlights from Jones, such as play-action fakes, and he had a lot of help from a plethora of Crimson Tide rushing yards for the 35-16 win. There was finally no one in front of Mac Jones at the start of the 2020 season, and the stats he would record would be typical of a starting quarterback for the University of Alabama. Against the University of Georgia, that was ranked number 3 in the nation at the time, Jones posted 417 yards and 4 touchdowns in the lopsided Crimson Tide victory. Mac Jones and the rest of the Alabama offense and defense continued to be downright scary on Halloween with a 41-0 win over Mississippi State. Jones connected to Devontae Smith for a touchdown 4 times that night. Mac Jones would post revenge on Auburn from 2019 and 2020 by having over 5 touchdowns and over 300 passing yards in a win. Against LSU, Jones again threw for 5 touchdowns and 385 yards, and in the SEC Championship, guess what? Mac Jones was once again throw for 5 touchdowns. In the Rose Bowl, Mac Jones and the Crimson Tide again came out on top thanks to Mac Jones' 4, not 5, but 4 touchdowns, but certainly was good enough for a 31-14 win against Notre Dame. In the national championship game, a game that the University of Alabama is no stranger to, with 5 touchdowns and 464 yards by Jones, the Crimson Tide against Justin Fields and the Ohio State Buckeyes again celebrated by holding up the national championship trophy with a 54-24 win. In that win, Jones showed and controlled his emotions during a turnover in the second quarter. Jones was pressured by the Buckeyes defensive lineman Baron Browning, who brought him down 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage and more importantly forced a fumble for a rare Crimson Tide turnover. Jones retreated to the sidelines and verbally let out his frustrations on the bench. According to ESPN sideline reporter Allison Williams, who recalled the event, after the self-talk, Jones returned to his offensive line with a smile on his face and told them to move past the mistake. During the 2020 season, Mac Jones completed 77% of his passes and only threw 4 interceptions while recording 4,500 passing yards and winning several conference and national awards such as the Johnny Unitas Golden Arm and the Manning Awards. Jones was a Heisman Trophy finalist and lost to his own teammate, Devontae Smith. It was no surprise that Mac Jones declared for the NFL draft, and thus the buzz around him only amplified, especially with the recent movement in the draft order and the 49ers now armed with the 3rd overall pick. So where will Mac Jones go? The 49ers have a really great quarterback in Jimmy Garoppolo, but so did the Kansas City Chiefs when they had Alex Smith and drafted Patrick Mahomes. Does Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch know something that the rest of us don't know? because Jones is listed behind Lawrence, Fields, Wilson, and even Trey Lance on some draft boards. Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch recently traveled to Tuscaloosa for Jones's pro day and had jubilant conversations with Nick Saban while there to watch Jones, so they seem to like him. Mac Jones could be exactly what the 49ers are looking for. After all, he is similar to the quarterbacks that Shanahan has worked with, like Kirk Cousins in Washington, and going back to 2016 when he was with the Atlanta Falcons. Matt Ryan, who was the MVP. Jones is perfectly capable of producing in Shanahan's passing offense, and if in San Fran, will have an offensive line that is solid. Targets that would be provided is the beast that is George Kittle, who should be back healthy. Mac Jones could really get it connecting with Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk down the field. That is, if he ends up wearing a San Francisco 49ers jersey and Jimmy Garoppolo isn't standing in his way for too long. But guess who else was at Mac Jones's pro day? A man who actually picked a six-pack lacking, skinny-armed quarterback that was drafted 20 years ago. A man that is also notorious for his relationship with Nick Saban. And a man that is also seeking a brand new quarterback. And his name is Bill Belichick, who was looking casually cool for springtime in Tuscaloosa and landed in Alabama to watch Mac Jones to make his throws as well. However, Mac Jones had a little bit of an off day at times and even made Bill Belichick shake his head when he overthrew the receiver on a deep ball. Maybe this is Mac Jones trying to tank his stock so he can slide all the way to the mid-15 pick so the Patriots could snatch him up. Let's not forget what Bill Belichick is capable of. So you might be wondering, okay, Mac Jones sounds really good. What are his pros and what are his cons? And is it plausible for him to go in the top 5 of the NFL draft? Well, honestly, that depends. What Jones provides is plenty of potential. He is a pocket passer that is so polished and so shiny that he rarely makes mistakes. Remember, he only had 4 interceptions last season, and he can throw into a tight window on go up and get it situations as well. But Devontae Smith is probably one of the best of going up and getting it, and Mac Jones is really comfortable in the pocket, mainly because he had a remarkable offensive line that are set to become NFL football players one day. His arm strength has also been criticized. Long release isn't quite a cannon, but is plenty good for the NFL. And when given the right weapons, he can all but end the war quickly by getting the ball to anyone and everyone out there on the field. Jones isn't really the running type, or maybe he has never had to run, but his arm and mind has shown that it works for him. And probably one of the things scouts love about him the most is he has remarkable processing speed, which is the inverse of what Justin Fields has going for him. Mac Jones is completely lauded for his ability to go through his progressions and make the right throw. But in reality, the question is, once again, he has that NFL offensive line, he has NFL caliber wide receivers, so how difficult was it really to go through your progressions when he was at Alabama? Will he be able to read the NFL coverage and still make those same passes while he's under pressure? Also, is he durable? Is he tough enough to get back up after hitting the turf? Because he is bound to get hit significantly more in the NFL than when he was in Tuscaloosa. Jones is a little bit older and wiser. He turns 23 in September, and the one thing he has and knows is he has the brains and maybe even a photographic memory type of intelligence. He directed the Crimson Tide offensive Goliath with grace and patience, making calls and changes at the line that resulted in points on the board. Mac Jones just held his pro day and threw for a second time in front of quite a crowd, so now that it is before draft day, what do NFL executives say about him less than 30 days before the draft? Well, via Sports Illustrated's Albert Breer, one unnamed NFL executive said after Mac's workout, "I thought he did really well. I thought he threw the ball well. His accuracy was obvious. He had a couple of misses early where you could see how competitive he is. I think Jones is a good player. I don't think he's elite, but he had good moments." Another executive from an AFC team said that he threw fine at pro day. Most guys do. Athletically, he's just average. He fits into the pocket passer category. He definitely has an outgoing personality, and you could see him cheering his guys on. If anything, you worry about the lack of athleticism when he has to create on his own. He's not an upper echelon athlete, but Tom Brady isn't either, but he compensates with anticipation, accuracy, and experience. So where does Mac Jones want to go? Well, at his workout press conference, he said,
"The 49ers would be awesome to play for, but at the end of the day, I can't look at it too much and let it be a distraction. They're going to pick who they're going to pick, and I'm just going to go in and work like I did for 4 years at Alabama. and hopefully it works out in the long run. And
Or maybe he'll end up in Boston and as Bill Belichick's next secret weapon with a long career destined ahead of him. I can see the shirts in Boston blue printed with MJ10 on the front, just like TB12. I can't wait until April 29th for the NFL draft. Can you?